The man sitting at the end of the boardroom table had no idea that his worst nightmare was about to walk through the door. David Morgan was one of the most respected directors in the company. For years, he had walked into this room with confidence. People listened when he spoke. Executives respected him. Employees feared disappointing him. He thought he knew exactly how his future would unfold, until the chairman stood up and said, "Everyone, please welcome our new owner." The doors opened. A woman walked in. David glanced at her casually. Then he froze. His face lost all its color. His mouth fell open. Because the woman standing there was the one person he never expected to see again. His ex-wife, Alexandra. The woman he had left 5 years earlier. The woman he had humiliated. The woman he had convinced couldn't survive without him. The woman he had abandoned for his young secretary, Chloe. David slowly stood. Alexandra? She looked at him, calm, confident, unrecognizable. Then she walked past him and sat at the head of the table. The chairman continued. Following the successful acquisition, Alexandra Morgan is now the majority owner and controlling shareholder of this company. David stared at her. No. Alexandra opened the folder in front of her. David's voice trembled. You bought this company? She looked up. Yes. But how? Alexandra gave him a small smile. 5 years ago, you told me I had nothing. She paused. Today, I own the company that employs you. The room went silent. Chloe couldn't move. David couldn't breathe. And Alexandra wasn't there to ask for an apology. She wasn't there to get her husband back. She wasn't even there for revenge. She was there because 5 years earlier, at the age of 40, she had walked out of a marriage that had taken almost everything from her, and spent the next 5 years rebuilding herself from the ground up. But David didn't know any of that. He didn't know about the nights she cried. He didn't know about the jobs that rejected her. He didn't know about the business she started with. Almost nothing. He didn't know how many times she wanted to give up. He didn't know about the sacrifices she made to rebuild her career while raising their 2 children. And he certainly didn't know that the woman he had once called dependent would eventually become a billionaire. Before we go back to the beginning and uncover how Alexandra went from a broken woman at 40 to the billionaire who would one day own the company her husband worked for, take a moment to subscribe to After the Vows TV. If you believe that sometimes losing someone can be the beginning of finding yourself, stay with me until the end, because Alexandra's journey is about to get much more emotional than you can imagine. Now, let's go back 5 years, to the day Alexandra's marriage finally ended. 5 years earlier, Alexandra Morgan was 40 years old. She had been married to David for 15 years. They had 2 children together, a 14-year-old daughter named Emma and a 10-year-old son named Ethan. From the outside, the Morgan family looked perfect. They lived in a beautiful home in an affluent neighborhood. Their children attended good schools. David drove an expensive car. Alexandra hosted dinners. They attended charity events. And David had a reputation for being a brilliant corporate executive. He was one of the company's most respected directors. He wasn't the owner. The company belonged to a group of private investors. But David was powerful. He sat on important committees. He negotiated major contracts. He was frequently mentioned as one of the executives being considered for the top leadership position. People listened when David spoke. They respected his opinion. They admired his confidence. Alexandra had once admired it too. When they met, David wasn't rich. He was ambitious. He was hungry. He was working long hours and dreaming about becoming successful. Alexandra had been there from the beginning. She remembered the cheap apartment, the old furniture, the nights they ate takeout, because neither of them had the energy to cook. She remembered David, sitting at the kitchen table, with business plans spread everywhere. "I'll make it," he used to tell her. Alexandra would smile. "I know you will." And he did, but somewhere between success and admiration, David changed. At first, it was subtle. He started correcting the way Alexandra spoke, then the way she dressed, then her friendships, then her decisions. When their first child was born, Alexandra took time away from her career. She had intended to return to work, but David made sure she didn't. "You don't need to work right now. I want to. We can afford for you to stay home. It's not just about money." David looked annoyed. Then what is it about? My career. He laughed. Alexandra, we have a child. I know. Then act like it. Those words stayed with her. She didn't return to work. Then they had Ethan. And by then, returning to her old career became even harder. David had become accustomed to having Alexandra at home. She managed the children, the house, the schedules, the school meetings, the birthdays, the family obligations. David worked, and Alexandra made it possible for him to work as much as he did, but he rarely acknowledged it. Whenever someone complimented David on his successful career, he would smile and say, "My wife takes care of the home," as though she hadn't sacrificed anything, as though her own ambitions had simply disappeared. David wasn't violent in the way Alexandra initially imagined abuse. He never walked into a room screaming every day. He didn't leave bruises. His abuse was quieter, more calculated. He knew exactly what to say. When Alexandra questioned him, he called her insecure. When she disagreed with him, he called her difficult. When she complained about being lonely, he told her she was ungrateful. When she wanted to return to work, he reminded her that she had been out of the industry for years. You've been home too long. You don't understand how business works anymore. You'll embarrass yourself. Sometimes Alexandra would look in the mirror after an argument and wonder when she had become so afraid of her own husband. David could make her feel guilty for spending money on herself. He could make her feel selfish for wanting time alone. He could make her feel like every problem in the marriage was somehow her fault. And whenever she threatened to leave, he would become suddenly kind. "I'm sorry. I was stressed. I love you. Let's not destroy our family over an argument." Alexandra would forgive him, again, and again, and again, until one day, she realized she wasn't forgiving him anymore. She was simply surviving him. Then Chloe arrived. She was 27, young, smart, confident, and ambitious. She was hired as David's executive secretary. Alexandra met her at a company dinner. David introduced them. "This is Chloe. She'll be working directly with me." Alexandra smiled. "Nice to meet you." Chloe smiled back. "Nice to meet you too." There was nothing suspicious about the meeting. Nothing Alexandra could point to. Nothing she could accuse anyone of. So she trusted them. That was what David later used against her. "You trusted too much," he would tell her. But the warning signs came. David started coming home later. He began taking business calls in private. His phone was always locked. He started buying clothes Alexandra had never seen before. He changed his cologne, and he became strangely protective of Chloe. One evening, Alexandra mentioned that Chloe had called the house. David immediately became defensive. "Why are you questioning her?" "I'm not questioning her. You sounded suspicious." "David, I just said she called. You're always looking for something." Alexandra stared at him. "Why are you so defensive?" "Because I'm tired of being interrogated in my own home." He walked away. Alexandra stood there alone. She had asked one simple question. Yet somehow, she was the one apologizing. The truth came on an ordinary Tuesday. David was taking a shower. His phone was charging on the kitchen counter. Alexandra wasn't looking through it. She wasn't searching for evidence. She was simply passing by when the screen lit up. A message appeared. "Chloe, I hate pretending we're just coworkers." Alexandra stopped. Her heart began pounding. Then another message appeared. "Chloe, you said you'd tell her this week." Alexandra stared at the phone. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. Everything she had been afraid of was sitting in front of her. When David came downstairs, Alexandra was sitting at the dining table. His phone was beside her. He stopped. "What happened?" Alexandra looked at him. "Who is Chloe?" David's expression changed. "Don't start." "Who is she?" "She's my secretary." "That's not what I asked." David sighed. "Alexandra, are you sleeping with her?" Silence. That silence was the answer. Alexandra's eyes filled with tears. "For how long?" David sat down. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." He rubbed his forehead. "I've been unhappy for a long time." Alexandra laughed through her tears. "So that's your explanation." "I'm not blaming you." "You are. I'm saying the marriage hasn't been working. You were cheating." David became irritated. "I told you I wasn't happy." Alexandra stared at him. "Then you should have left before you betrayed me." David looked away, and in that moment, Alexandra understood something. The affair wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. One David had made repeatedly. David filed for divorce, not Alexandra. David, he wanted the marriage over. He wanted Chloe, and he wanted Alexandra out of his life as quickly as possible. He assumed she would fight. She didn't. At least, not for him. There were arguments about the house. There were discussions about the children. There were lawyers. There were uncomfortable conversations. And throughout it all, David behaved as though Alexandra had become an inconvenience. One evening he said, "You need to be realistic." Alexandra looked at him. "About what?" "You haven't worked in years." "I know. You don't have a stable income." "I know. You can't maintain the lifestyle you've become accustomed to." Alexandra stared at him. "You think that's what I'm worried about?" David shrugged. "I'm trying to help you." "No?" She shook her head. "You're trying to remind me that you think I can't survive without you." David smiled. "Can you?" Alexandra didn't answer, because at that moment, she wasn't sure. And David knew it. The divorce was finalized. Alexandra was 40 years old. She left the family home. She took her children with her. She moved into a smaller house. The first night there, she sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not because she wanted David back, but because she was terrified. She had been married for 15 years. She had built her entire adult life around a family. Now she had to figure out who she was, without the man who had spent years telling her who she was supposed to be. Emma found her crying. "Mom?" Alexandra wiped her face. "I'm okay." Emma sat beside her. "You don't have to pretend with me." That broke her. Alexandra pulled her daughter into her arms. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For letting things get this bad." Emma shook her head. "You didn't do this." Alexandra held her tightly, and for the first time, she realized she wasn't only rebuilding for herself. She was rebuilding for her children. She wanted Emma to see a woman who could leave a situation that was hurting her. She wanted Ethan to understand that love was never supposed to look like control. The first year was ugly. There was no glamorous transformation. There was no overnight success. Alexandra struggled. She sent out resume after resume. Some companies rejected her because she had been away from the workforce for so long. Others offered her entry-level positions despite her previous experience. One interviewer looked at her resume and said, "You've been out of the industry for nearly a decade." Alexandra nodded. "I know. Why should we hire you?" For a moment, she had no answer. Then she said, "Because I know how to learn." She didn't get the job. She went home and cried. But the next morning, she applied somewhere else, and somewhere else, and somewhere else. Eventually, she got an opportunity. It wasn't a senior position. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She woke up early. She went to work. She learned. She made mistakes. She improved. She started remembering the woman she had been before David convinced her she was incapable. Then she began noticing something. She was good. Really good. The skills she had buried hadn't disappeared. They had simply been waiting. Sandra had been Alexandra's closest friend for years. She had watched the marriage deteriorate. She had watched Alexandra disappear inside it. And now she watched her come back. One evening, Alexandra told Sandra she wanted to start her own consulting company. Sandra stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Yes. You just started working again." "I know." "Alexandra, starting a company isn't easy." "I know. You could lose money." "I know." Sandra smiled. "Then why are you smiling?" Alexandra looked at her. "Because for the first time, I'm scared of something I actually chose." Sandra laughed. And that became the beginning. Alexandra started small. She used her experience. She networked. She studied. She took contracts. She worked late. She reinvested every profit. There were months when she barely paid herself, but slowly, the company grew. One client became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became 20. Then came a major corporate contract. That contract changed everything. Alexandra hired employees. She expanded. She started investing. She learned about acquisitions. She surrounded herself with people who understood finance better than she did. And she listened. She didn't pretend to know everything. She learned. Meanwhile, David's life with Chloe wasn't the fairy tale he had imagined. At first, everything was exciting. Chloe was young. Their relationship was new. They traveled, they attended events together. David felt admired. But eventually, real life arrived. Chloe discovered that the man she had wanted wasn't the same man she had imagined. David was controlling with her too. He questioned where she went, who she spoke to, why she spent money, why she worked late. The same patterns began repeating. Chloe started seeing what Alexandra had seen. One evening, Chloe said, "You treated Alexandra exactly like this." David became angry. "Don't compare yourself to her." "Why?" "Because you're different." Chloe looked at him. "No," she shook her head. "You're the same." David walked out. Their relationship never fully recovered. 5 years passed. Alexandra's company had become remarkably successful. She wasn't famous. She didn't flaunt her wealth. She didn't post pictures of expensive cars. She invested. She built. She acquired smaller businesses. She hired talented people. She made careful decisions. And eventually, her net worth crossed into the billionaire range. But Alexandra still lived differently from the woman she had once been. She understood that money wasn't freedom by itself. Freedom was knowing nobody could tell you that you weren't capable of building a life. Then one afternoon, Alexandra received a confidential business proposal. A large corporate group was restructuring. One of its subsidiaries was being offered for acquisition. Alexandra studied the documents. Then she saw the company's name. She stopped. It was the company where David worked. The same company where he had spent years building his reputation. The same company he had once believed would make him untouchable. Sandra looked at her. "You're not thinking about, I am. Alexandra." "I'm not buying it because of David." Sandra waited. Alexandra looked at the financial reports. "The company is undervalued." Sandra laughed. "Of course you would say that." Alexandra smiled. "I mean it. You don't want revenge?" Alexandra thought about it. 5 years ago, she would have. Now? She felt something different. Opportunity. That was all. She didn't want David's life. She wanted the business. And if David happened to be working there, that wasn't her problem. The acquisition took nearly a year. Alexandra didn't simply write a check. There were negotiations, audits, financing arrangements, shareholder approvals, legal reviews, management assessments. She studied everything. She wanted to know what she was buying. The company had a strong foundation, but it had problems. Some divisions were underperforming. The leadership structure needed restructuring, and several executives had become comfortable. Alexandra saw the potential. Her advisors warned her, "It will be a difficult acquisition." She smiled. "I've survived worse." The deal was eventually approved. Alexandra became the majority owner, but she didn't announce it publicly. She wanted the transition handled properly. There was no revenge announcement, no press conference designed to embarrass David, no social media post, nothing. She simply waited for the official board meeting, the meeting where the leadership team would be introduced to the new owner. David arrived that morning completely unaware. He was 47 now, still respected, still successful, still confident. He walked into the boardroom and greeted several executives. Chloe was there too. She had remained with the company, though their personal relationship had changed dramatically. David sat down. The chairman entered. "Good morning, everyone." The meeting began. Then the chairman said, "As you know, following months of negotiations, the acquisition has been finalized." David nodded. He knew the company was being acquired. He simply didn't know by whom. The chairman continued, "We are pleased to introduce the new controlling shareholder." The doors opened. Alexandra walked in. David's entire body froze. She looked nothing like the woman who had left him 5 years earlier. She was composed, elegant, confident. But there was something else. Peace. David stared at her. "Alexandra, you—" She smiled. "Good morning, David." The chairman smiled. "Ms. Morgan, the floor is yours." Alexandra walked to the head of the table. She looked around. Then she looked at David. 5 years is a long time. David swallowed. "You bought the company?" Alexandra nodded. Yes. Why? She answered simply. Because it was a good investment. David stared at her. You planned this? No. She paused. I built a life. This opportunity happened to appear in front of me. Then she looked directly at him, and I was finally in a position to take it. David stood. You can't expect me to report to you. Alexandra looked at him calmly. I don't expect anything, the chairman interrupted. David, the new organizational structure has already been approved. David looked around. His position had changed. His authority had been reduced. Alexandra wasn't personally punishing him. She was restructuring the company. And that somehow made it worse. Because she wasn't acting like an angry ex-wife. She was acting like an owner. David looked at her. You really don't care, do you? Alexandra frowned. About what? About what happened between us. She was quiet. Then she said, I cared for 15 years. David's eyes filled. Alexandra, I cared when you lied. I was wrong. I cared when you made me believe I couldn't survive without you. I'm sorry. I cared when you cheated. David lowered his head. And I cared when you walked away. She paused. But that was 5 years ago. Alexandra looked around the room. I'm not that woman anymore, David whispered. I never thought you'd become this. Alexandra smiled sadly. Neither did I. After the meeting, Chloe approached Alexandra. Can we talk? Alexandra nodded. They walked into a quiet hallway. Chloe looked uncomfortable. I know you probably hate me. Alexandra shook her head. I don't. You should. Why? Because I was part of what happened. Alexandra looked at her. You were. Chloe swallowed. I thought I loved him. Alexandra said nothing. I thought he was unhappy because of you. Alexandra smiled sadly. He told me the same thing. Chloe looked down. I understand now. Understand what? He wasn't looking for a better wife. Alexandra waited. He was looking for someone who would make him feel like he was always right. Alexandra didn't respond. Because Chloe had finally understood something Alexandra had taken years to learn. David didn't destroy Alexandra because she wasn't enough. He tried to destroy her because controlling her made him feel powerful. The biggest difference in Alexandra's life wasn't the money, it was her children. Emma was 19 now, Ethan was 15. They had watched everything. They had seen their father leave, they had watched their mother struggle, and they had watched her rebuild. One evening, Emma asked, Mom, are you happy? Alexandra smiled. Yes. Really? Really? Emma looked at her. I'm proud of you. Alexandra's eyes filled with tears. Why? Because you didn't let what happened to you become who you are. Alexandra hugged her daughter. Ethan joined them. For Alexandra, that moment was worth more than the company. Because 5 years earlier, she had been afraid her children would remember her as a woman who had been abandoned. Instead, they remembered her as a woman who stood back up. Several months after the acquisition, David asked Alexandra to meet him privately. They sat in a quiet restaurant. No lawyers, no executives, no children, just the two of them. David looked older, not physically, emotionally. I owe you an apology, Alexandra nodded. Yes, you do. He took a breath. I was cruel to you. She said nothing. I made you believe you weren't capable of anything. She remained silent. I stopped you from pursuing your career. Another pause. I made you dependent on me. Alexandra looked at him. And then I blamed you for being dependent. David looked down. I was wrong. Alexandra's voice was quiet. You were. I regret leaving. She looked at him. Do you regret leaving me? David nodded. Every day. Alexandra thought about that. Then she said, I used to dream about hearing those words. David looked up. What happened? I stopped dreaming about them. He swallowed. Do you ever miss me? Alexandra smiled. I miss who I thought you were. That hurt him. I wish I could go back. You can't. I know. Alexandra stood. I forgive you. David looked surprised. You do? Yes. Then maybe. She shook her head. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. David lowered his eyes. I understand. And for the first time, he actually did. That night, Alexandra drove home alone. She didn't feel victorious because she owned a company. She didn't feel victorious because David had been forced to watch her succeed. She didn't even feel victorious because she had become a billionaire. She felt victorious because she could finally look at her old life without wanting it back. 5 years earlier, she had walked away from David believing she had lost everything. She had lost her marriage. She had lost her home. She had lost her confidence. She had lost the identity she had built around being his wife. But she hadn't lost herself. She had simply forgotten where she was. And leaving David forced her to find her again. The woman who had once asked permission to pursue a career now owned a major corporation. The woman who had once been told she couldn't survive independently now employed hundreds of people. The woman who had once cried because another woman had taken her husband's attention now understood something much more important. She had never been competing with Chloe. She had never needed to. Because Chloe could have David, Alexandra wanted herself back, and she got her. The next morning, Alexandra walked into the company's headquarters. Employees greeted her. She smiled. She walked through the lobby, and then she stopped. On the wall was a photograph of the company's leadership team. David stood in the photograph. Once, seeing his face would have ruined her entire day. Now she simply looked at it. Then she continued walking. Sandra was waiting in her office. She smiled. "How does it feel?" Alexandra put her handbag down. "Honestly? Honestly." Alexandra looked around the office. "It feels like work," Sandra laughed. "That's it? That's it." Sandra shook her head. 5 years ago, you were crying because that man told you that you couldn't build anything without him. Alexandra smiled. "I remember." "And now?" Alexandra looked through the window. "I don't think about what he said anymore." Sandra smiled. "That's how you know you've won." Alexandra nodded. Because Sandra was right. The greatest revenge wasn't that Alexandra became wealthy. It wasn't that she bought David's company. It wasn't that she sat at the head of the boardroom table while he sat across from her. It wasn't even that he finally regretted losing her. The greatest revenge was that Alexandra no longer needed any of those things to feel whole. David had spent 15 years convincing her that she was nothing without him. It took Alexandra 5 years to discover the truth. She had never needed him. She had simply needed the courage to leave. And when she finally did, she didn't just rebuild her life. She built one so extraordinary that the woman who once begged her husband to see her worth became the woman everyone else wanted to work for. David thought he had left his wife for a younger woman. He thought he had traded up. He thought Alexandra would spend the rest of her life regretting him. But 5 years later, when the doors of that boardroom opened, he finally understood what he had really lost. Not his wife, not his home, not even his marriage. He had lost the woman who had believed in him before anyone else knew his name. And while he was busy searching for someone younger, Alexandra was becoming someone he could never replace. She didn't return to his life to take revenge. She returned because she had become powerful enough to walk through the same doors that once made her feel small, and realize they had never been bigger than her. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's becoming so secure in who you are that their regret no longer matters. And that was Alexandra's real victory. She didn't need David to choose her again. She had finally chosen herself. If Alexandra's story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to After the Vows TV for more emotional stories of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and second chances. And I want to hear from you. If you were Alexandra, would you have forgiven David after everything he did, or would you have walked away for good? Tell me in the comments. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the ending of one chapter is simply the beginning of your greatest story. Boo-hoo!